Long before the Bibles we know today filled churches, hotel rooms, and homes, there was a different kind of book. A Bible written on old pages, with strange markings and stories that seem almost forgotten. Jonathan Romie has spent years chasing after it. Not the polished versions we see today, but the original words, the raw stories, the untold truths.
This volume is the oldest surviving copy of the New Testament. This is the ancestor of all the Bibles that everybody else has in the world.
This is not just another history lesson. This is about a Bible they don't want you to see, and the man who made it his life's mission to bring it into the light.
Well, I fight any and all spiritual attacks with prayer, like the Rosary, Divine Mercy, the Angelus, all of those. I feel like I've become more hyper-aware, and I've probably sensed more attacks.
Have you ever wondered if what you read today is the full story? Stick around to find out. A hunger for the real truth. Jonathan Romie was not always a man who searched for ancient books. He started like many of us, sitting in a wooden pew, Bible open on his lap, listening to the same verses every Sunday. But something inside him would not rest. The more he read, the more he felt gaps, questions that no one around him could answer. Why did some parts of the Bible feel like pieces were missing? Why did history speak of other ancient writings, but the church never mentioned them? Jonathan wanted real answers, not polished sermons, not watered-down explanations. He wanted to see the original words, the stories written by hand before kingdoms rose and fell, the texts untouched by kings, councils, and politics. Now, here's the thrilling part. It was during one quiet night, while digging through old religious history books at a university library, that Jonathan stumbled onto a name that kept showing up over and over again: the Dead Sea Scrolls. These scrolls were found hidden in caves near Qumran in 1947, and they were some of the oldest copies of the Hebrew Bible ever discovered. They included ancient versions of Genesis, Exodus, and even parts of Psalms that looked different from what many modern Bibles contain.
Biblical manuscripts, copies of the Bible that are 1,000 years older than any previously known copy of the Bible, as well as a treasure trove of documents that we had never seen before.
Jonathan was stunned. If there were different versions of these holy books, why had no one ever told him? And more importantly, what else was out there, still buried or hidden away? That night lit a fire in him that would never go out. From that point on, Jonathan stopped trusting second-hand stories. He decided he would find the truth for himself, even if he had to search the farthest corners of the world. Jonathan's search quickly brought him face to face with a hard truth. The Bible we know today is not the full story. Over the centuries, powerful men chose which books stayed and which ones were left out. Some were removed because they were hard to understand. Others were cut out because they did not fit the ideas the leaders wanted to teach. Jonathan found writings like the Gospel of Thomas, a book that claims to record secret teachings of Jesus. The Gospel of Thomas was found among the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt in 1945, a set of ancient manuscripts hidden in clay jars. Some scholars argue that this gospel could be as old as the four Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. This gospel was a collection of sayings from Jesus that sounded very different from the teachings found in the familiar four Gospels. Instead of focusing on miracles and public acts, this gospel spoke quietly about the kingdom of God being inside each person, waiting to be discovered, a spark hidden deep within every heart. The more Jonathan read, the more he realized that early Christianity had not been a single, unified movement, but a wild garden full of many voices, each struggling to capture the mystery of God in words, stories, and visions.
That wasn't politics, that was spirituality. You can't cherry pick the aspects of your faith you like and dispense the things you don't like. You said it yourself, I came not to bring peace, but to bring a sword.
Some writings called for quiet meditation, others for bold action. Some described a hidden wisdom, others a battle against invisible forces. Jonathan asked the question few dared to ask. If early Christians had access to these sayings, why were they cut out? Who decided what stayed and what was erased? The more he learned, the clearer the answer became. In the first few centuries after Christ, different Christian groups believed very different things. Some followed letters like Romans and Corinthians. Others followed gospels we no longer hear about, like the Gospel of Mary and the Acts of Peter. It was not until the 4th century that church leaders finally made an official list of sacred books, and even then, there were fierce arguments. The journey through ancient scriptures. Jonathan realized something chilling. The Bible did not fall from the sky fully made. It was chosen, piece by piece, by powerful men who argued, fought, and decided what millions would later call the Word of God. But what about the parts they left out? Were they lies, or were they truths too dangerous to survive? Jonathan knew he had to keep going. If ancient Christians had access to these lost writings, then finding them could change everything we think we know today. He started looking for the oldest sources he could find, tracking down dusty translations, forgotten scrolls, and even forbidden books hidden in monastery libraries. And with every step, the pieces of a bigger, more complicated story began to unfold before him. With each new discovery, Jonathan's mission became clearer. He would not only find these lost books, but would read them, study them, and understand them with his own eyes. Jonathan knew that to truly understand the original Bible, he had to go beyond modern books. He had to touch the old scrolls, the worn-out parchments, the real pieces of history. He started visiting libraries and museums. One of his first stops was the British Library in London. There, he viewed the Codex Sinaiticus, one of the oldest complete Bibles ever found, written in Greek over 1,600 years ago. As Jonathan stood there, staring at the fragile ancient pages, he felt like he was looking through a window into a world no one had told him about. A world where the Bible looked and sounded very different from the one people carried in their hands today. He noticed something strange. Many familiar verses were missing, and some books were arranged differently, as if the hands that copied these ancient words had a different story to tell than the one passed down through modern traditions. Curious and unsettled, Jonathan dug deeper and learned about the Dead Sea Scrolls, a collection of manuscripts discovered by accident. After that, Jonathan traveled to Israel. He also learned more about the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered between 1946 and 1956 in caves near the Dead Sea. But there's more. He walked into the shrine of the Book Museum in Jerusalem, where the Dead Sea Scrolls are kept. These scrolls contained some of the oldest copies of the Hebrew Bible, but they also included books that are not found in today's Bible. These scrolls, older than the Codex Sinaiticus, contained some of the earliest versions of the Hebrew Bible, along with books that most people had never heard of, like the Book of Jubilees, the War Scroll, and the Community Rule. The scrolls were brown and torn, but the words still spoke loudly across the ages. They spoke of a time when the Bible was not yet edited, a time when people passed stories down without fear of kings or councils changing them. Jonathan's journey was no longer just about finding old pages. It had become a mission to piece together the parts of the Bible that had been left out, locked away in dusty libraries, forbidden by councils, or simply erased from common memory. As he flipped through ancient texts and listened to the stories whispered by forgotten scholars, he stumbled upon the books that had once been honored but were now treated like dangerous secrets. The first book that caught his eye was the Book of Enoch, a strange and powerful story that spoke of angels coming down to earth, teaching forbidden knowledge and creating a race of giants called the Nephilim. This book, once treasured by early Christians, had been banned and buried, surviving only in the traditions of distant Ethiopian churches. Jonathan could not understand why such a detailed and rich story would be removed unless it challenged the neat version of faith that later rulers wanted people to follow. The Book of Enoch made the heavens feel alive and wild, full of beings with powers and emotions that could no longer be neatly boxed into simple sermons. The hidden truth. During Jonathan's research, he discovered the Shepherd of Hermas, a strange and beautiful book filled with visions, parables, and instructions for living a holy life, which was considered scripture by many early Christians before disappearing from the Bible we know today. Each book Jonathan found painted a new color into the picture of faith, making the old stories more vivid, more human, and more real. He realized that the Bible had not always been about control and fear, as some had used it, but about a fierce, living journey between God and humanity, messy and breathtaking, filled with hope and heartbreak. Standing alone in dimly lit rooms, holding copies of these lost books in his hands, Jonathan began to feel the weight of history pressing on him. These were not just forgotten writings. They were living witnesses to a faith that once dared to ask hard questions and explore deep mysteries. As Jonathan pieced everything together, a clear picture began to form in his mind. The Bible we know today was not the full story. It was only a part of a much bigger, wilder, and more colorful picture. The original Bible, the one hidden under layers of decisions, councils, and politics, was something alive, something raw. It told stories not only of triumph, but also of struggle. It was not clean and neat. It was filled with questions, mystery, poetry, loss, hope, and dreams. The councils that decided which books would stay and which would be erased did not do so because the missing books were lies. They made those choices because some writings gave too much power to individuals, allowing people to find God inside themselves without needing priests or kings. Writings like the Gospel of Thomas, which said the kingdom was already inside you, threatened the idea that someone else had to stand between you and God. Jonathan realized that the original Bible was a wild and holy thing. It was full of voices of men and women, voices of shepherds, voices of prophets, voices of broken-hearted sinners who found hope in the middle of ruins. It was not a book designed to make people obey. It was a book designed to make people think, feel, search, and love. When he held the ancient copies in his hands, he could almost hear them breathing. These were not dead words. They were living seeds, waiting to be planted again in hearts ready to seek something more. He wondered, standing there under a cracked ceiling of an old library, what would happen if people today were given back the full Bible, not just the parts polished by history? Would faith feel different? Would the world be kinder, freer, less afraid? Jonathan believed it would. He believed that if people could read the lost books for themselves, feel the rawness of early faith, they would realize that God was never about fear. God was about love that could not be contained in buildings, titles, or rules. Jonathan Romie's discovery is not just about an old Bible. It is about something deeper that touches every one of us. Throughout history, there have always been stories that were hidden, books that were locked away, and truths that were pushed aside. This Bible is one of those truths. But it is not a Bible that destroys faith. It is a Bible that challenges the fear that often surrounds faith. It reminds us that real belief is not about blind obedience. It is about asking questions, seeking answers, and walking a path that is honest, even when that path is not easy. The Bible you hold might be only the beginning of the real story.
The history of Israel dates back several thousand years, filled with events and movements that have shaped the culture and identity of its people. The country is in the Middle East, with a land area of approximately 8,600 square miles and a population of about 9 million. Israel is a country with different blends of cultures merged, with the Jews being the majority and the Arab being the largest minority. We would bring you history in not so many words. Jewish people are identified as one of the world's most ancient civilizations, dating back to ancient times. The Jews' history began in the biblical lands of Israel, where they lived as a Canaanite people in the early centuries before the birth of Christ. According to the Bible, God promised this land to the Jewish people as an eternal possession, and they have consequently identified with it. The Kingdom of Israel was established in the 10th century before Christ with the rule of King Saul, followed by King David and King Solomon. The kingdom remained intact until it was conquered by the Babylonians in 586 BC. Afterward, varying foreign powers ruled the area until the Jewish Zionist movements sought to revive a Jewish homeland in Palestine. In 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, pledging to establish Palestine as a Jewish homeland, paving the way for establishing a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The Palestine region was made a British protectorate after the defeat of the Ottoman Empire in World War I. During the British Mandate from 1922 to 1948, tensions grew between Jewish immigrants who migrated to Palestine and Palestinian residents who considered their presence a threat to their sovereignty. Violent outbreaks began when secret militias sprung up, brewing fights between Jews and Arabs, destabilizing the region. The British relinquished their control of Palestine in 1948, leading to the United Nations Partition Plan. This plan divided Palestine into two separate entities, one for Jews and the other for Palestinians. The Jewish leaders accepted the proposal, establishing the State of Israel on May 14, 1948. 5 countries, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt, attacked Israel, triggering the First Arab-Israeli War. Fighting with a unified spirit, Israel won the war and expanded its geographical territory. Israel's victory was a defining moment in the 20th century's history, having national and international significance.
This is Victory Day in Jewish Jerusalem, the day the winners of the battle for the Holy City.
Since its inception, Israel has grown considerably, establishing itself as a democratic nation, developing a flourishing economy and scientific achievements, and becoming a thriving cultural center in the Middle East. Despite its size, Israel is an influential country with the potential to impact global politics. Despite its modern-day progress and newly found freedom, Israel is still regarded as the biblical Holy Land by Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Its capital, Jerusalem, holds most of its holy sites like the Temple Mount, Old City, Western Wall, and Mount Zion, among others. In Judaism, Israel is the Holy Land, and Jerusalem is the Holy City. According to them, it is the place that holds the core of their faith, where their journey began. It is an essential aspect of Judaism, serving as a centerpiece for Jewish history, religion, tradition, and culture. For Christians, it is the place where the life and death of Jesus unfolded. For Christians, Israel is a holy land where they can connect with their faith and deepen their relationship with God. Christian pilgrims travel to Israel to visit these sacred biblical sites and walk in the footsteps of Jesus. For many, this pilgrimage to Israel is a life-changing experience that strengthens their faith and helps them grow as individuals. Since the beginning of time, when the Israelites worshipped, they went to temples and synagogues. But since the loss of the first and second temple and the initial land, that has become a bit of a hassle for them. The first temple recorded in the Bible is known as Solomon's Temple. The temple, built by King Solomon to honor God, was built on the site of the present-day Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It existed between the 10th and 6th centuries BC. According to the Old Testament, King Solomon built this temple in Jerusalem to house the Ark of the Covenant and to serve as the center of Jewish worship. The temple was destroyed in 586 BC during the siege laid on Jerusalem by Babylon during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. After the destruction of Solomon's temple, the second temple, later known as Herod's temple, was constructed. It was built after the Israelites returned from their exile in Babylon. Initially, they built a modest place of worship. Still, it was redesigned and reconstructed into its original structure with giant walls and big columns when King Herod the Great ruled over Judea. The temple served as a central place of worship and sacrifice, where people gathered for prayer, festivals, and sacrifices. The temple also served as a place for the administration of justice, the study of the Torah, and other religious activities. After its recreation, it stood for over 580 years before the Romans again destroyed it during the Roman invasion of Jerusalem in 70 CE. When the Second Temple was destroyed, a proposal to build the Third Temple came to light. The Third Temple was to succeed the First and Second, and be a sacred place of worship for the Jews. The Third Temple is also significant to the beginning of the Messianic Age, but building a temple in Israel is not as straightforward as you might imagine. Now you might ask, why is Israel finding it difficult to rebuild the temple? You're about to find out. Since the fall of the Second Temple, various groups, including Christians and Muslims, have claimed control over the Temple Mount and the site of the former temples, causing a massive problem for the Jews as they cannot seem to lay claim on the land where the previous temples were built. Yet, they cannot go ahead and snatch the land without serious repercussions. One of the issues Israel faces regarding the temple is the social life in the region. The temple is in the middle of Jerusalem, a capital city with complex racial and religious demographics. The construction of the temple may lead to social tensions and polarization of communities. If the temple is built, relocating residents and businesses in the affected area will be required. This can cause resistance from locals who are hesitant to leave their homes. The construction of the temple can put pressure on the existing infrastructure and public services in the area, like schools, hospitals, and other public utilities. Another issue to be considered is the impact of the building of another temple on the environment. The Temple Mount is in a susceptible ecological area, and any disruption can have severe consequences. The construction of the temple may require the removal of rare and endangered species, threatening biodiversity in the area. The temple may also require the excavation of ancient structures or artifacts, which can damage the archaeologically significant sites in the area. This may lead to protests from environmentalists concerned about the area's ecological and historical value. Each time Israel tries to lay any claim on any part of Jerusalem, they are met by opposition from far and wide. And this is because one of the main problems facing the temple is religious issues. The capital city, Jerusalem, is shared with Palestine, and some countries recognize West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and its east as the capital of Palestine. The temple is a center of Jewish worship, and any changes or disruptions to its construction or operation can cause religious controversies. For example, the location of the temple is a contentious issue. The Temple Mount is one of the holiest places in Judaism, but is also a holy site for Muslims. Historically, debates over ownership and use of the Temple Mount have led to violence and bloodshed. The Muslims would not hear of building a third temple, as it is the site of the Dome of Rock, an Islamic monument at the Temple Mount Center. Jewish visitors are discouraged from visiting the complex, and Jews are prevented from worshipping there. Some scholars also have reason to believe and have strongly claimed, against the Jews' long-standing belief, that no previous Jewish temples were built there. To counter this claim, researchers and scholars performed more research and discovered that the Al-Aqsa Mosque was built on a Jewish ritual cleansing site. Robert Hamilton, a British archaeologist, provided the proof of this. He wrote a paper detailing his findings, including his work, investigations of the mosque foundations, and what he found. He achieved a breakthrough in his investigations after an earthquake shook the mosque, causing severe damage and demolishing a part in 1927. He discovered a mikveh, a bath used in Judaism for ritual immersion to achieve purity, underneath the mosque's floor. The mikveh is considered so important to Judaism that it is usually built even before the construction of the temple or synagogue, and should be connected to a natural water source that would continuously replenish it with fresh water, making it living water. This significant part of history was used during the Second Temple and for immersion before gaining access to the Temple Mount. Although they were just recently released, these discoveries are not new. In fact, they were made some centuries ago, but were confiscated by the British Mandate Archives to prevent upsetting Islamic officials. It has been proven that the previous Jewish temples were built where the current Temple Mount sits. The Sanhedrin, a tribunal for the Jews, has begun taking steps for the Jewish temple services to begin soon. Initially, the Sanhedrin played a significant role in the governance of Jewish communities during the Second Temple period. They were responsible for interpreting Jewish law, resolving disputes, and overseeing the execution of punishments. The new Sanhedrin, the nascent Sanhedrin, is a Jewish religious council re-established in 2004 to revive Jewish law and temple services to prepare for rebuilding the Third Temple in Jerusalem. Although their legitimacy and authority are widely debated within the Jewish community, they have held conferences and made headlines with controversial decisions, one of which is the idea to rebuild the temple. The farmland and forests are being cultivated to provide for the needs of the temple upon construction. The Sanhedrin claims that although people believe that the sacrifices made in the temple are from the blood and ashes of animals, they attested that the plants grown around the temple and Israel were also essential and used in these sacrifices. According to some sources, the nascent Sanhedrin has reportedly been involved in supervising the cultivation of new forests in Israel in preparation for rebuilding the Third Temple. These efforts began over a decade ago and have been carried out in various locations to recreate the natural environment of Israel in biblical times, as described in Jewish scriptures. The nascent Sanhedrin has focused on working with Israeli government agencies, private organizations, environmentalists, and individuals to plant trees and perform other land conservation activities, which are important parts of Israel's land conservation efforts. The land is considered an essential part of the Jews' connection to their heritage and the future rebirth of the temple. So these activities are being conducted per Jewish law and tradition. However, like many of the Sanhedrin's decisions on issues, it is essential to know that the nascent Sanhedrin's involvement in forestry and agriculture activities is partly controversial. Some groups are questioning their authority, while others are raising concerns about the potential impact on the environment and the balance of the ecosystem. The Sanhedrin is primarily focused on promoting and preserving Jewish law and tradition, and facilitating the rebuilding of the temple. While forestation and agriculture are essential components of Israel's land conservation efforts, they fall outside the traditional realm of the Sanhedrin's religious and legal responsibilities. Likewise, any activities related to forestry and agriculture in Israel typically fall under the jurisdiction of government agencies, such as Keren Kamoth L'Israel, KKL, or the Israeli Ministry of Agriculture, rather than the Sanhedrin. In addition to forestation, one of the preparations put in place because of rebuilding the temple is the training of Kohanim. Kohanim are a group of Jewish individuals descended from the ancient priesthood of Israel with specific religious roles and responsibilities primarily related to performing sacrificial offerings and blessings in the temple in Jerusalem. Although no functioning temple exists, Kohanim maintains its unique status and is accorded certain privileges in Jewish tradition. They are made to go through temple ceremonies held by the Sanhedrin and the temple movement to train them on character and mannerisms. They are also trained in using the types of equipment of the old and new temples and altars, and offering burnt offerings. The new altar can only be built at the site of the original altar atop the Temple Mount. The altar was built uniquely so that it could be quickly dismantled and reassembled in another location. Once rebuilt at its permanent position on the Temple Mount, it can once again be used to offer sacrifices. Orthodox Jews believe that rebuilding the temple is the only solution to the problems faced by the Jewish people and the world. Part of the requirements of rebuilding the temple includes producing a red heifer. To purify the Jews to enable them to take part in temple services, the ashes of the red heifer are needed. Red heifers are extinct, which poses a problem in bringing them back when the temple is rebuilt. How does the Sanhedrin intend to go about it? Since the plans to rebuild the temple have been put in motion, various plans and concepts have been proposed, and one of the most promising is one involving Rabbi Chaim Richman, a rabbi in Israel and the international director of the Temple Institute from 1989 to 2020. The rabbi has been highly invested in bringing back the red heifer to Israel, as is written in Numbers 19, a red heifer without blemish. The heifer was required to be purely red and without blemish and had never been used for any work or labor, hooked to a plow, impregnated, and coming from a specific lineage. According to Jewish history, only 9 red heifers have ever been slaughtered to purify the Jews between the time of the First and Second Temples, amounting to about 1,000 years, giving them enough time to become extinct. The slaughtering of a red heifer was previously done on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and was a rare occurrence. Its ashes are believed to have the power to purify those who come into contact with them. The heifers are burnt whole, and their ashes are stored cleanly, mixed with water in small parts for each use. With the guidance and supervision of Rabbi Chaim Richman and other rabbis from the Temple Institute, a non-profit organization dedicated to rebuilding the Third Temple, they got a knowledgeable cattle farmer who understood the animal husbandry concept and attempted to produce a red heifer. They implanted the frozen embryos of North America's red Angus into Israel's domestic cattle. More is needed for the red heifer to be made available, as there are specific rules regarding its breeding. It had to be born in Israel without blemish. 5 red heifers were recently transported to Israel amidst speculations on their significance. The cows were inspected by rabbis and accepted as worthy as the farmers who breed them left them untagged as part of the requirements for them to have no blemishes. They were located by Bone Israel, a Christian organization responsible for transporting them to Israel. As preparations are being made for the rebuilding of the temple, it is worth noting that the control of the mount still lies with the Muslims, and action must be taken to recover it. Many believe political action is needed to grant Jewish access rather than legal action. In its ruling concerning the work being done, Israel's Judicial Council stated that due to the situation's complexity, the decision was beyond the boundaries of the law, and there were more reasonable ways to decide the case than a legal ruling. This is because there are also political issues against rebuilding the temple. Israel is a democratic country, but it is also a country with a complex political system. The construction of the temple is subject to political debates, which can cause delays and uncertainties that the country cannot afford to deal with, considering all they have at hand. The construction of the temple can affect the international community, especially its neighboring Arab countries. There is already tension in the region between both parties, and the political instability can easily be aggravated and escalated by Israel's decision to rebuild the temple, as some Arab countries view the construction of the temple as a threat to their sovereignty and stability. Also, the project may require foreign aid from the Jewish diaspora and other countries sympathetic to the cause. However, international financial aid comes with political strings attached, a clause that Israel is unwilling to be held by at the moment, as it can be a source of tension between Israel and its possible donors. International or regional organizations, states, or countries might step in as mediators. Still, we can all agree that if it would be settled, the cooperation of leaders of different faiths must be gotten. Christians and Jews make their claims based on the prophecies. What are the prophecies? According to the Bible, and in an understanding of Daniel's prophecy, in Daniel 9:25-27, the prophet Daniel received a vision from an angel that proclaimed the coming of a Messiah, a Savior, the destruction of the city and the temple, and the rebuilding of the temple. The prophecy describes the timeline for rebuilding the temple as 70 weeks, or 490 years. According to the prophecy, the countdown would begin from issuing the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. The first 7 weeks, 49 years, would be for rebuilding the city, followed by 62 weeks, 434 years, for the arrival of an anointed one. After 62 weeks, the anointed one would be killed, and the city and the temple would be destroyed by a new ruler, which was fulfilled with the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 CE. The prophecy went on to describe a period of 1 week, 7 years, during which a new leader would arrive, forming solid alliances and covenants with the people. In the middle of the week, halfway through 7 years, the new ruler would stop the offering of sacrifices and defile the temple. When this occurs, it would signal the start of a time of great suffering and punishment, which would last until the end of the 70 weeks. Many people believe that the Antichrist in the prophecy in Revelations 13 is the future political leader that would make a covenant with the Jewish leaders to rebuild the Third Temple, paving the way for fulfilling some of the prophecies.
But what do you think? How do you think history would change if more hidden texts like this were revealed to the world? Let us know in the comments section. Remember to like, share it, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.